Here's my presentation as to why the novel Frankenstein should be considered a timeless novel. First off, we have what does it mean to be timeless? Timeless can be explained just by breaking down the word timeless, meaning that something throughout time has very little or no change. Examples we know would be like The Little Black Dress or movies like Forrest Gump and The Godfather. Books like Pride and Prejudice and the Bible are also timeless. Frankenstein is timeless, but for different reasons. Or I guess slightly different reasons, very slightly. The Frankenstein summary. I'd like to give you a quick summary of what the story is before I just dive into the specifics. Frankenstein is a science fiction novel about a man named Victor Frankenstein that creates a monster while away at college. He has recently lost his mother and has a loving family at home in Geneva. He is in love with Elizabeth, his adopted sister, or as he calls her, his cousin, and has a younger baby brother named William. His best friend is Henry, and he and his father all stay behind in Geneva while Victor studies in Germany. Once he reanimates a corpse that he puts together himself, he immediately becomes disgusted with it, and the monster flees. The monster proves to be very dangerous, and Victor begins his hunt to stop the monster from doing any more damage. Here are several, I guess, few components about why, Frankenstein should be considered timeless. We have it should be thought-provoking, relatable in some form, original, and full of entertainment value. Because, of course, if it isn't entertaining, it wouldn't be timeless, because timeless means wanting to read it over and over. I've narrowed it down to the main three reasons as to why the novel is timeless. There is symbolism, relatability, and, of course, originality. I've titled the slide The Fire because Frankenstein is heavily influenced off the mythological tale that, mythology, of course, is timeless, of about the story about Prometheus. And the thing about Prometheus is that he was the god that gave mankind fire. And the book itself, Frankenstein, is titled A Modern Prometheus, meaning that Victor Frankenstein is very similar to Prometheus because they both created a fire. Of course, one was a literal fire, while the other one was a fire like a monster, something that was just as equally destructive, to be honest. And of course, he let it go out of control. Similar to Prometheus, it was a step that probably neither of them should have taken, and they both paid for it. Here I have a clip that further describes why this novel is, related to Prometheus.
Zeus, whose wisdom is everlasting, would not give the power of fire to the race of men. Prometheus deceived the king of gods, turning fire to men. Zeus, who thunders on high, was stung in spirit, and his dear heart was angered when he saw amongst men the far-seen ray of fire. He said to Prometheus in anger,
Son of Iapetus, surpassing all in cunning, you are glad that you have outwitted me and stolen fire. Great play to you yourself, and to men that shall be.
In retaliation, Zeus fastened Prometheus to a rock, in the midst of Mount Caucasus, with inextricable bonds and cruel chains. Zeus set on him an eagle, which by day would devour his immortal liver, and by night his liver would regenerate. Did the son of Iapetus kindly Prometheus?
So I think that sums it pretty fairly as to why Prometheus had to pay for what he did. Even though he stole wisdom, it was wisdom they believed to be shared, but we know sometimes it's not better to share some things. It can hurt someone, of course, a literal fire as well as of course, the imaginary fire I'm describing here that the monster Frankenstein created really was. I have a quote here. I was dependent on none and related to none. The path of my departure was free, and there was none to lament my annihilation. My person was hideous and my stature gigantic. What did this mean? Who was I? What was I? Whence did I come? What was my destination? These questions continually recurred, but I was unable to solve them. This describes some very dark feelings as to why, they were created. Here I have a few more, I guess, answers as to why this was a timeless novel, especially part of the whole symbolic aspect of it. There were religious overtones. Ability to play God, of course, was used, probably a little bit overdosed by Victor. The essentials of human life, family values, love in all forms, and of course, human failure, which is probably the most important as to why any novel is timeless, because we see in all characterization that failure is ideal because we see that humans cannot be perfect and that we can learn from mistakes. Perhaps the most important part of Frankenstein was how the characters display love, or lack of thereof in Victor's case, which led to his demise. I have another quote here. No human being could have passed a happier childhood than myself. My parents were possessed by the very spirit of kindness and indulgence. We felt that they were not the tyrants to rule over our lot, according to their caprice, but the agents and creators of all the many delights which we enjoyed. When I mingled with other families, I distinctly discerned how peculiarly fortunate my lot was, and gratitude assisted the development of filial love. He describes his childhood as being very loving, but I think we can all agree that because his monster became so disastrous and uncared for, that Victor probably did not learn the proper way to either convey love or at least contain it, or at least show it in some form that would at least persuade a monster to not go on a rampage killing people. There are several types of love shown here. The classic timeless loves. There's family love, there's romantic love, and love, for a friendship. Particularly with Henry, we immediately like his character because Henry would remind you of your best friend. He does everything to help Victor. He helps him when he's sick. Even when he, finds out that he's in something pretty deep and that it can change everything. He sticks around for him, and we immediately probably connect that to our very own best friends. And the thing about that kind of love is that we see rejection, which is another popular component of anything that's timeless. We see that people did not get everything they want. This monster wanted love. It did not get the love it wanted, or very much the love it deserved. But his friends did, and we see that causes something very, very evil and malevolent in the end. Um, of course, one of the largest parts of Frankenstein is its originality. Frankenstein was among one of the first science fiction novels to focus on the deconstruction and reconstruction of human life. It was quite literally, deconstruction and reconstruction, both figuratively and physically, in the novel, of course. It was, written around the huge scientific revolution. This was early 18th century, written by Mary Shelley, a teenager. So we had to know that she was, wild in imagination, and all the science and ideals floating around at the time. You had to consider that, hey, would it be possible to bring someone back to life? And if we did, what would happen had they, lived? So I think that is very original. Now we look at it as a cliche, but back then it was probably something very outlandish. It's very important here because it's what draws us to read it to begin with. You wouldn't read something if it's the same thing over and over again, if you already heard the story. Pretty much like any Nicholas Sparks novel. You know what to expect. Well, I'm pretty sure the first people that read Frankenstein weren't sure what to expect. Even reading during the novel, you keep thinking this isn't going to happen. No, that wouldn't happen. That's really unlikely. Well, it happens. He continues to fail, and not meet the expectations set for him or any standards whatsoever. And that's what draws us in because we're so used to, or at least we were so used to, the ideals. Everything happening with purpose and happening fluidly. This was not, a fluid novel. There'd be heavy breaks and gray areas all throughout. And I have a quote here by the very monster, Frankenstein. I gazed on my victim, and my heart swelled with exultation and hellish triumph. Clapping my hands, I exclaimed, I too can create desolation. My enemy is not invulnerable. This death will carry despair to him, and 1,000 other miseries shall torment and destroy him. And we see here that as, Frankenstein played God, he created a monster, a true monster that wanted to only convey death because he was not given the love he felt that he deserved. And I think that's very important in a timeless novel because, as I said before, it's not the usual. We like happy endings. This was not a happy ending. It was an incredibly unhappy ending, and it was really unexpected. You keep thinking there's a possibility in pretty much every other chapter for it to correct itself, and it doesn't. And that's what's so lovable about this novel and how timeless it is because you see, humans don't learn from mistakes. History repeats itself. So unfortunately, humans make the same mistakes over and over again. And as for a conclusion, these are the main reasons as why Frankenstein, or any book for that matter, could be timeless. The three I mentioned, I think, are the most vital It's the most important as to why this novel is particularly timeless. I could go on and on as to why each character, gives some form of timelessness or offers any sort of form of agelessness to the novel, but I think these following reasons I have stated speak for themselves. And here I have my very few sources, and I thank you for watching and listening.